Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Tuesday, August 4th, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll hear from Journey Gunderson. She is executive director of the National Comedy Center in Jamestown, New York. That happens to be the hometown of Lucille Ball. And this weekend, the National Comedy Center is hosting its annual Lucille Ball Comedy Festival, which runs Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The headliners this year are Jerry Seinfeld, Bert Kreischer, and Seth Meyers. The National Comedy Center is a first-of-its-kind institution devoted to the study of comedy, and it opened its doors in 2018. We'll talk about plans for this year's festival and the growth of the institution. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. Paramount Skydance CEO David Ellison has spoken out on the legal drama surrounding his effort to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery. This deal has been drenched in politics from the start. In an op-ed published in the New York Times on Tuesday morning, he goes right to the heart of what he sees as the political issue that spurred 12 state attorney generals to file suit to block the deal. He sees the big issue coming down to the ownership of CNN. Ellison asserts in the op-ed that he will, quote, not bend newsrooms to my view, end quote. He also asserts, quote, I believe that news should be based on facts and truth, end quote. We'll get a little more insight on what's going on at Paramount Skydance later today when the company reports its second quarter earnings after the bell. But business marches on at Paramount. Viola Davis has cut a deal to star in and executive produce the new Paramount Plus series, Ascent. She'll play an elite corporate fixer in the series from veteran screenwriter John Logan and Paramount Television Studios. Davis, of course, won an Emmy for her work on ABC's How to Get Away with Murder in 2015. Not that there was much doubt, but in fact, Spider-Man Brand New Day has crossed the $1 billion mark at the global box office in just 6 days. Only Avengers Endgame got to that mark faster in 2019. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. And now it's time for conversations with industry leaders about news and trends in show business. Today, my guest is Journey Gunderson, Executive Director of the National Comedy Center. The center is both a hands-on museum and a repository of papers and memorabilia for such legends as George Carlin, Carl Reiner, and most recently Mel Brooks. Gunderson is the dynamo that got the museum up and on its feet and to open its doors in 2018. She's done so much work to build ties with the comedy community in New York, Los Angeles, and throughout the country. I've been to the National Comedy Center, and I can assure that for comedy buffs, it's worth the trek to Jamestown in beautiful Western New York. Journey Gunderson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
You are getting ready for a fun-filled, action-packed week as you host the annual Lucille Ball Comedy Festival that is presented by the National Comedy Center, which you head and have run now for almost going on 10 years. I know from experience how much fun the National Comedy Center is and how important it is to really capturing and putting into its proper historical, social, cultural context the importance of comedy.
That's right. Yes.
Let's talk about this year's Lucille Ball Fest. Jamestown is, in fact, the birthplace of America's most famous redhead, Lucille Ball. So you have incredible headliners like Jerry Seinfeld, Bert Kreischer, Seth Meyers. What's new and different this year?
I always tell people that there's no substitute for experiencing live comedy, and yet we operate a museum of comedy year-round. And so there's no better way to spend a few days than seeing live comedy in the evening, but being able to consider it within the context of the whole of the art form. And any artist you're seeing live you're also connecting the dots to the entire pantheon of our history and heritage in this great art form. And I think that transforms the experience. It makes it much more profound.
Even before the Comedy Center was opened in 2018, the festival existed and get top names. Is it the Lucy connection that brings you such, I mean, these are marquee comedy names in any city, let alone Jamestown, New York.
Yes, I do think that this date on any comedian's calendar has become something different. And the idea that one can come and perform, whether it's Seth Meyers or Bert Kreischer or Jerry Seinfeld, in a place that has taken up the mantle to tell a comedy story and give it the museum treatment it has long deserved, to the place that has established the archive that never existed before. I do think that that sets us apart from any other city that an artist is touring and performing within. And so that does help. I think now word has gotten out in the artist community that you have to make ample time to traverse the galleries of the National Comedy Center when you come and perform at the Lucille Ball Comedy Festival in Jamestown. I think that's my favorite part of the job, is touring comedians themselves. When Jon Stewart toured the museum before headlining the festival last year, he just said, "No one's ever done this for us before. No one has done this." I think it felt profound to him, this realization as he was walking through the museum, that it wasn't until 2018 that anybody opened a museum that tells the story of this art form. And so I lay awake many nights wondering if perhaps building something formal and institutional for the group of people most apt to lampoon anything formal or institutional was perhaps a bad idea. And yet here we are.
It's been many years, but I have been to the festival because Jamestown it's not a tiny city, but it's not a big city. And because of that, it just feels like the whole town is abuzz with, again, these big names. That must be very exciting for the larger Jamestown community, which I know you are a very important hub.
Yes, every year at the Comedy Festival, we see ticket buyer zip codes from more than 40 states represented. And, Jamestown is within a day's drive of more than a third of the U.S. population. So while it's a destination, people are showing up in droves. It only took 3 weeks to see visitors from all 50 states to the National Comedy Center when we opened. And finally, there is a place for a comedy nerd to go and to take a deep dive. And when we were designing the museum, we said, we've got a design for the skimmers, the swimmers, and the divers. And that's more of a museum design term than a comedy term. But we wanted to make sure that if somebody came through the museum who was a Carlin fan, for example, for whom this is Mecca, that they could spend hours deep diving through his joke notes, of which we have scanned tens of thousands. You can explore those joke files. But if you're a 19-year-old kid with his family on a road trip and you're not sure why you're supposed to yet care about George Carlin or Carl Reiner or Mel Brooks, etc., that we also communicated to that museum visitor. That's our job, is to elevate the reverence and respect for this art form and its artists.
Well, I don't want to blow it for future visitors, but there is a very fun setup that allows you to be part of, let's just say, a very famous episode of I Love Lucy. You referenced George Carlin, Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks. The National Comedy Center in recent years has acquired their papers, has acquired their archives. And to your point about Jon Stewart recognizing the significance of this, it's a repository of things that maybe in the past weren't seen as that worth preserving in a museum fashion, but certainly are now. Is that a level up going into what you'd planned in opening the National Comedy Center, or was that always a goal?
That was always the goal, and we knew there was a void of anybody taking responsibility for conservation and preservation in this way. I think most people agree that comedy history is important, but also assume that important things somehow get saved automatically, and they don't. Preservation does not happen passively. Someone has to decide to preserve something before it's lost, and that is why we built the National Archive. There's an urgency to this conservation work as well, so that it can be around for future generations to learn from. Mel Brooks is a great example. The collection of Mel Brooks archives is more than 150,000 documents, including more than 5,000 photographs. And when addressing why this matters and why that's important, just in his case, I think from a very early age, Mel Brooks knew how to wield comedy to take back power. His ability to fearlessly satirize the atrocities of war and the horrors of humanity not only helped heal a post-World War II nation, it's a playbook we want future generations to have. That this is a method of processing, it's a method of grieving, but it's a way of taking power back from a situation. And Mel Brooks could blend what some might consider lowbrow slapstick with highbrow satire like no other, and I'm glad he's still doing it to this day.
If I recall right, Journey, Kelly Carlin was really key. As I recall, George Carlin's papers were the first big collection that you acquired. That must have been a leap of faith for her to give her father's most treasured, her father's life's work to a museum.
Yes, I'd heard that Kelly was preserving herself, her father's archive, and I also knew that George Carlin was an archivist of his own career. He saved everything. And I had heard the legends of the way his system of joke files with Ziploc baggies and scraps of paper, hotel stationery, bar napkins, sometimes a scrap of paper no larger than a quarter, organized in his own hand with labels that said things like religion, death, stupid people, words. And so I reached out to Kelly and visited and got to know her. She got to know a little bit about what our vision was. And Kelly always said this was the right decision because they're doing it for the right reasons. These people are in it for the right reasons. It's a nonprofit. They seek to elevate this as an art form and position it for study and make it accessible. She said that she knew that if she gave it to a different institution, it might just end up like that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where it's maybe being preserved in a basement somewhere, but really what's the point unless people can learn from it and engage with it? And that was really validating, but also it was a key domino to your point.
Mm-hmm. Do scholars come and want to look through if they're working on something? Do you have that access for people that are doing research?
We do. And anyone can make an appointment to research within the archives. And we've worked with documentary filmmakers like Amy Poehler and Judd Apatow in Amy's case, her documentary on Lucy and Desi.
Which was so good.
Yes. And in Judd's case on his documentary about George Carlin and now on Mel Brooks. What's interesting is that we see academics and researchers and students of all ages. So now we do field trips throughout the museum. We have a lot of college courses for whom this is a destination and also something they're tying their curricula to. So it's great to play the role of the institution that presents comedy in a way that it can really be learned from and studied. And the other thing that I think the museum achieves and that was a compass for us is that good comedy looks easy. So for casual consumers of comedy, everyone kind of thinks that comedians are winging it, and it's just the opposite. Anybody who works in comedy knows that. There's such a great deal of precision to doing this well, and that was, again, something that we hope to do with the exhibits, was pull back the curtain on the process of this art form, and in doing so, engender in visitors a respect for the artists and the creators.
Does the center have an endowment? How is it funded? Is it through grants and public donations?
Yes, the center has an endowment. No one pays us to do this work. It is our job not just to do the preservation, but to figure out a way to sustain the effort. And so every day I'm spending as much time overseeing the preservation and the conservation and the curation and the storytelling that takes place within the museum as I am finding the next underwriter of this work, sponsor of this work, and donor to the endowment.
Mm-hmm. Has institutional Hollywood been helpful to you?
Yes, it has. Certainly that's a job made harder by the geography of Jamestown. We aren't right in LA or New York, but once people visit, they get it. I think every headliner of our festival, every comedic artist, once they have toured, has become a donor. And that's, again, really validating. They're walking through the museum, they're learning about the archive, and they're understanding, again, like Jon Stewart said, no one has done this for us before. And this is also work you want to be done by a nonprofit. And so from the very beginning, we've taken the approach of being more of an art museum and a history museum than a Hall of Fame. And I remember Kelly Carlin saying that many entities had approached her with more of a Hard Rock Cafe vision of putting her father's materials on display. And I think she always knew it was better suited for something much more comprehensive and that could have an impact more profound.
And a serious effort to study, as you said, the precision, the timing, the cultural moment. It absolutely warrants it. I know that the National Comedy Center has been one of the biggest things to come to Jamestown in a long time.
Lucille Ball deserves some credit. Many know she was a really savvy businesswoman in addition to being a great comedian. And she was the one who said to Jamestown decades ago, don't just make a museum about me. Don't make it just a shrine to Lucy. Make Jamestown a destination for the study and celebration of all comedy. And so I think we were wise as a community to listen to that. And we joked recently that she made her hometown every comedian's hometown, because what's in your hometown? All that stuff you saved. So this is where the comedy keepsakes now live. And thank goodness now comedians have a new hometown in the National Comedy Center Archives and Museum.
Journey, thank you so much for your time and keep in touch.
Thank you for having me.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. Disney reports its earnings before the bell on Wednesday. Warner Brothers Discovery, Versant Media, Fox Corp, Lionsgate, and Roku all go on Thursday. Bill Hader, the very talented multi-hyphenate, will deliver a keynote address at Variety's upcoming Entertainment and Technology Summit in Los Angeles on September 17th. Daily Variety listeners, rest assured you will be hearing more about this summit in the coming weeks. Turner Classic Movies is launching a Friday night documentary showcase, Films on Film. It'll be hosted by Ben Mankiewicz. It will debut September 4th with the 2025 retrospective Charles Grodin, Rebel with the Cause, about the great actor and director who left us in 2021. We love to hear from our listeners, so please send thoughts, gripes, and other feedback about Daily Variety to podcasts@variety.com. Before we go, congrats to Christopher Halpin. He's been named Chief Financial Officer of NBC Universal, reporting to Comcast co-CEO Mike Cavanaugh. Halpin joins the company from Barry Diller's People Inc., formerly known as IAC. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton. Stick, snick, sick, picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.